I think the most important thing in this entire press conference is deal or no deal. We heard Emmanuel Macron there talking about trying to negotiate a new Iran deal and making a lot of eye contact there with Donald Trump, trying to show that he is in agreement with him, but at the same time trying to say, well, let's not just throw out the baby with the bathwater. What is the situation with those two and Iran?
Well, we expected this to be one of the main issues that they talked about, and sure enough, it seems that was in fact the case. And you're right, before President Macron came to Washington, D.C., there was a lot of talk about the work that he would have to do to convince Donald Trump to not exit the Iran nuclear deal. It's a decision that he'll have to make later on in May. I believe it's in mid-May. But this is something that we heard President Trump highlight. He said that the United States and France are allied on how to deal with certain issues, one of them being Iran. But you didn't hear the president really give any solutions about how the two nations were going to come together to do that. But when it became President Macron's turn to talk, we heard him sort of lay out these pillars of how a new deal potentially, or an amendment to the current deal, could happen. He laid out 4 pillars. He talked about blocking the nuclear activities of Iran. He also talked about being sure that there was no sort of long-term advancement in that nation's nuclear development. He also talked about creating a stability in the region that would curtail the dominance of Iran in other countries. And I think what is interesting here is you heard both leaders talk about the importance of broadening this agreement so that it doesn't just cover Iran and Iran's nuclear ambitions,
sure,
for lack of a better way to put it, but that it needs to be something much more comprehensive that takes into account what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Yemen. So again, we didn't hear any details about how they will do that, but you do see their alignment, at least on that issue, Matthew.
Tetiana, right at the beginning, when we saw the two presidents walking into the room, just before that, in came Mike Pence and Sarah Sanders, but also John Bolton. He's the relatively new National Security Advisor and is probably providing a lot of the political, philosophical strength to Trump's thinking now. Just remind our viewers why Bolton is known as the Hawk.
Yeah, that's right. Bolton has been called a hawk on Iran. He takes a very tough stance on that nation, and it's thought that his national security advice will weigh heavily on President Trump's decision. Although I must say that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the White House press secretary, who is also in that press availability, made it very clear about a week and a half ago that the decision maker in the White House, regardless of what he's hearing from his advisors, is in fact President Trump. But there has been a lot of talk, again, about whether or not Emmanuel Macron would be able to convince President Trump to go one way or another when it comes to the Iran deal. And of course, John Bolton is going to be part of that decision, as well as Mike Pompeo, who is in the process of being confirmed as the new Secretary of State, Matthew.
And just finally, a real simple one. The body language between the two, they had a very firm handshake, and then we saw Trump do some air kiss, trying to be all French and sophisticated, and then said, I like him a lot. These two kept making eye contact. There's something going on here, isn't there? They are actually friends, it seems.
There's a bit of a bromance happening here. That's what everyone's been calling it. And I don't know if you saw the part before they came into the meeting. President Trump, sort of in a very friendly way, brushed some dandruff off Macron's shoulder, saying, we've got to make him perfect. Then he said, he's already perfect. So it's a love fest, Matthew.